fellow humans! So I have this really dream princess gown, you could say, that I want to wear. I'll just show you. It looks like this, and I imagine myself frolicking through a field or running through a castle in this gown. The problem is, I don't have it. So I wanted to make myself one. Now, I don't have that much faith in my abilities that I'm going to be actually able to make something that looks even remotely like this, but that's okay, because even if I don't make it perfect or I don't make it how I want this time, in a few years I could just try again. But if I'm never going to try, then I'm never even gonna get something that I like, or something even remotely close to my dream running through a castle gown. So in this video, I'm going to start making the basic layers of it. So I'm going to make the layers that I'm going to wear under a top layer, which is going to tie the whole thing together. And since I want to also be able to wear this thing on its own, I thought, why not just make it a different video, because I have a lot of footage from this already and I would rather clear this footage up before going on to the next part of this gown. But stay tuned for this dress and also for the story time involved with this. Now, the details of this story are a little unclear to me, which you'll figure out in a second when I start telling the story, but mainly because I didn't need to worry about anything at the time that this situation took place. Now, this story takes place a while back in 2015, and now my family make an annual holiday somewhere every Christmas, and we try to do this every year. But that particular year, we were heading to Mount Gambier in South Australia. Now, usually if we're going to a location which involves the Great Ocean Road, we do take the Great Ocean Road there, because that's pretty much the only time we're going to be going there to visit, and it's just like the really pretty view, which you can pretty much only get on the Great Ocean Road. Like, the inland ways that you can use to get to Mount Gambier are kind of just like the inland ways of the rest of Australia, or at least the rest of the eastern coast. So it doesn't really make sense to use the inland way, but like usual, we set off onto the Great Ocean Road. But while we were going and we approached our first major town after Anglesey, which is Lorne, we kind of started having second thoughts. I don't know exactly why we did this, because again, I was kind of young and I didn't really care all that much, except for the fact that my view was getting stolen from me. But my parents were like, hey, let's take the inland route this time. Yeah, honestly, now that I think back on it, I don't know what the reason behind that was, but it was definitely a substantial reason where we were like, yeah, let's go this way, this is better. Now, before entering the town of Lorne, there is a road that you can take which will take you onto the inland path to go to Mount Gambier, and so that's what we did. We just turned right there and then we sped off. Well, we didn't speed off, we were driving the legal limits, so we just made our way to Mount Gambier. And since this was a holiday, we weren't really too concerned about anything. Definitely not concerned about reading the news, because why would we do that? We're trying to relax. And we were mostly distracted by just looking at the things around us and stopping here and there to take some photos or just like enjoy ourselves, to eat or something. And it was just a fun road trip up. And we didn't really know what was happening in the rest of Australia at that moment, because we were just trying to enjoy our little holiday and, yeah, again, trying to avoid the news. And I think maybe along the route that we took, somewhere our phones lost connection to the network and we weren't really getting called for a bit, but eventually we did arrive in Mount Gambier and we just like settling down into our accommodation, and then suddenly our phones kind of started going off and there was like a few messages there. It was like, oh yeah, are you guys alright? Hey guys, are you there? And then we also got a few calls, and at first we were incredibly confused. Why are our friends and family asking us if we're okay? We're on a holiday, guys. Like, you don't have to be that paranoid. We're not babies. We can handle ourselves. Since we do have the four of us here together, as well as any help that we would possibly need, any emergency service help we would ever need in the town right next to us. So it was really strange. But anyways, we picked up a call and like the first thing our family member said was like, hey, are you guys okay? And we're like, yeah, why wouldn't we be? And that's when we got the news. Now, this is incredibly unfortunate, but honestly, I still cannot help but thanking my lucky stars that I was saved from this, and I know that is a huge privilege to have. So what had happened is that a bushfire, which had been burning around the area of Great Ocean Road, I suppose earlier that week and maybe even the week prior. I'm not entirely sure because now that I try to dig up the evidence, this is like 6 years ago, and so articles aren't exactly that clear. But that fire had progressed, and several towns along the Great Ocean Road had to be evacuated, along with Lorne, and as well as Apollo Bay. I'm not entirely sure if the fire quite reached there. I do know that it was around Lorne and around Apollo Bay because those places were heavily evacuated and then being monitored 24/7. People were all gathered in one place, but there was still a large loss of obviously the vegetation around that area and people's homes. And that is so upsetting because, and while I've never been in an active bushfire situation where my home has been threatened by a bushfire, I can sympathize for those people that did lose their homes. And while I acknowledge that I'm incredibly privileged in the aspect that I've never had to experience that, I do mourn for those that lost something that day, and I'm just so grateful that at least according to the articles that I've seen, no lives were lost in that specific fire on that Christmas day. And now the timing of this fire was also incredibly just the nearest miss. I think that the fire approached that area where we turned inland about maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours after we left that area. And so I am so thankful that I or anyone in my family wasn't hurt that day. And I am truly thankful to be here in one piece today, although not saying that anything would have particularly happened to me if I had remained there. Perhaps I also would have been taken to be evacuated with all the others, which would have been fine. And I do trust our emergency service workers in Australia to get things as under control as they can. And if they can't get them under control, they would have evacuated everyone else to some other place, because we care for the people here. But this story is just one from someone who hasn't had that much real life experience with bushfires in a country that has very frequent bushfires. And a lot of people have dealt with a lot of really bad things as a result of these bushfires. And just the Black Summer bushfires that happened, well, last summer in the 2019-2020 summer season, they were really awful. And even at my house, I don't live near any of the areas that often get affected by bushfires because I do live in metropolitan Melbourne, so I am generally safe for the most part from that. But there were times where you would just walk out of the house and you would come back in coughing. There was the strongest stench of burning wood, and as someone who actually likes the smell of burning wood, that was awful. It was a smell of burning wood and rubber. I don't exactly know what that smell was, but it was awful. And now that I think about it, I just hope it wasn't like the smell of burning flesh, because we lost so much of our wildlife in those fires, and it is so truly upsetting. And during that entire time, COVID wasn't that big of a thing in Australia then. Australia's hands were already so tied with these bushfires. If at the moment you are being affected by any kind of bushfire or even flooding, I do hope that you're well. I do hope that everyone out there is safe. Now, to try and not make this a really upsetting transition from reality to me just trying to have fun with my life, so I tried to make this base dress, and at first I made some like petticoat layers with some netting that I got, and then I got this really beautiful fabric that I have, and I cut out the bodice pieces, and I also cut out a skirt. And now with the skirt, I couldn't exactly make a full or half or any kind of circle skirt, but I did want to do that. So ultimately what I ended up doing was I made a big waist, but then I also made it taper down, so I had 2 different panels that I would stitch back and front, and the waist was a lot bigger than my actual waist, so I could gather it up, and then the button was obviously large. After I had stitched the 2 front panels of my bodice together, I stitched the front panels to the 2 back panels, and then to sew up the back panel, I started to installing my zipper. And now I found a zipper foot last time I went looking for a button foot in my sewing machine, and I was so happy, and this was the first time I've used a zipper foot, and it has been the greatest experience of my life. So if you're thinking if a zipper foot is worth it, it definitely is. If you don't have a zipper foot, go get yourself one. Then I wanted to add pockets to this, just so I could store my phone. Honestly, I don't need to store anything else, but I decided to make huge pockets anyways. But I learned this technique from Bernadette Banner, and basically you just kind of trace out your hand, and then you traced out your hand again, and that just becomes the shape of your pocket, and it doesn't have to be overcomplicated, which I like. As I started stitching my 2 skirt panels together, I left a hole where I wanted my pocket to be, and then I started stitching the pocket in. The pocket stitching was a little difficult, and I just had to make sure that I was stitching the right bit and I wasn't stitching the pocket shut, but I did eventually manage to get that, and then I just stitched the pocket around the outside so it wouldn't just let everything that I put in it fall out. The next bit was completing the bodice portion, so I just hemmed the collar portion and the sleeve portion because I want to leave this sleeveless. And while I was doing this, the most amazing storm was outside, and honestly, I really like storms. I like rain, I like thunderstorms, I just like the vibe that they give me. And since it wasn't really that cold outside on this day, I really like that feeling where it's not that cold, but it's also not a humid kind of storm. So I got to go outside and look at this amazing storm. Next step was to gather up the waist of my skirt so that I could attach it to the bodice. Okay, so I had a problem where the torso of this thing was too long, so now I've had to make some adjustments, and I've just folded over this one bit
of bodice. I don't know if you can tell how I did this, but basically this is the bodice, and I've just folded this bit over and I'm just going to stitch along this line, so hopefully where this thing meets is like the same. I don't know if that makes sense.
Now, upon attaching the gathered skirt to the bodice, I realized that it looked hideous. It kind of looked like a cupcake, and when I tried it on, there was a lot of pouching at the waist. Also, the waist was really bulky. So I decided that if I wanted to fix that pouching problem, I would have to take out the entire skirt, regather it, and attach it on. But I decided instead of doing that, I was just going to get rid of the gathers altogether, and I was just going to make it like an A-line skirt, which I thought would look more sophisticated anyways. So I went ahead and did that. And if you want to see my process for that, I do have it up on my TikTok as of posting this video, so you can go check that out. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you're having a good day. I hope that you continue to have a good day, and I will see you next time.